Wednesday night, kitchen table, apartment quiet. A man sits across from someone who matters, partner, friend. It doesn't change the scene. The other person has been talking for 10 minutes about something important, something emotional. And the man is listening, genuinely listening. But when the other person stops and says, quote, zero, the answer that arrives is the same one that's been arriving for 15 years. A blank. Not a wall, not resistance, just an empty room where a response is supposed to be. He's not cold, he's not indifferent, he's not playing a game. The feeling was there once. Somewhere, a long time ago, it got edited out. And the editing was so clean that he can't find the cut. We've been talking about patterns that disguise themselves as personality. Avoidance, wearing the mask of introversion, hypervigilance, wearing the mask of empathy, a comfort zone, wearing the mask of connection. This one is quieter than all of those, and it affects a population that almost nobody in this space addresses directly. Men who stopped feeling and don't know how to start again. Ronald Levant at the University of Akron coined a term in 1992 that should have changed the conversation. Normative male alexithymia. Not a disorder, not a diagnosis. A norm. He argued that the majority of men in Western cultures are socialized into a mild form of alexithymia, the inability to identify, describe, or process emotions. Not because the emotions are absent, because the pathway between feeling and awareness was systematically narrowed during development. The emotions are still there. The access got removed. Here's where the research gets interesting. The mechanism isn't dramatic. It's not a single event. It's 1,000 small corrections across a decade. A boy cries and hears, "You're fine." A boy expresses fear and hears, "Be brave." A boy shows anger and it's tolerated. A boy shows sadness and it's redirected. Over years, the nervous system learns a specific map. Anger, acceptable. Frustration, manageable. Sadness, dangerous. Tenderness, invisible. The inner range doesn't disappear. It gets compressed. And the compression becomes so familiar that by 25, the man doesn't experience it as restriction. He experiences it as identity. I'm just not that kind of person. Tiffany Chaplin at George Mason University ran a meta-analysis across 227 studies and over 21,000 participants. The finding? Boys and girls begin life with statistically identical expressive range. By adolescence, the gap is measurable. By adulthood, it's structural. The divergence isn't biological, it's trained, and the training doesn't stop internal responses from occurring. It stops them from reaching awareness. The signal fires, the conscious mind doesn't receive it. James Gross at Stanford spent decades on what happens next. His model of expressive suppression shows that when affect is consistently blocked at the expression stage, two things happen. First, the subjective experience diminishes. The person genuinely registers less. Second, the physiological response increases. Heart rate, cortisol, sympathetic activation, all elevated. The body responds more. The mind registers less. Over time, the gap between body and mind widens into something that looks from the outside like calm. From the inside, it looks like nothing. And nothing becomes the baseline. There was a man, late 20s, broad shoulders, quiet voice, the kind of person people describe as quote for quote. Worked in logistics, lived alone, had a small circle. His partner of 3 years left, and he described the experience the way someone describes a delayed flight. Inconvenient. Surprising. Noted. A friend asked if he was okay, and the answer was, quote, 5, delivered with the same intonation as ordering coffee. 6 months later, he couldn't sleep. His jaw hurt from clenching. He couldn't explain why he kept driving past his ex's street. His body knew something his mind refused to name. The response didn't leave when the awareness was removed. It just found different exits. And that's the part nobody in this space says out loud. The numbness isn't peace. It's a debt. Every unfelt grief, every unprocessed rejection, every moment of tenderness that got intercepted and rerouted, it accumulates. The system holds it for years, sometimes decades. And around 30, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, the storage capacity runs out. That's when the cracks appear. Insomnia, irritability without source, physical symptoms that don't match any diagnosis, a sudden inability to be in the same room as intense affect in other people, not because they're, quote, sicks, but because they're activating something that was supposed to stay sealed. The infrastructure of suppression wasn't designed for permanent use. It was an emergency measure, and the emergency was childhood. The emergency ended. The measure didn't. If that hits something, it's supposed to, not as blame, as recognition. The training wasn't chosen. No boy sits down at age 8 and decides to stop feeling. It happens to him. Through a culture that rewards stoicism and penalizes softness. Through a household that may have been loving but wasn't literate in what people carry inside. Through a peer group that enforced the code without anyone writing it down. The responsibility isn't for how it started. The responsibility is for whether it continues. Here's what the research points to. The pathway between feeling and awareness wasn't destroyed. It was narrowed. And narrowed pathways can be widened, but not through force, and not through a single breakthrough moment. Gross's work suggests that the first step is the simplest and the hardest. Labeling. Putting a word on a physical sensation while it's happening, not after, during. The chest tightens. That might be anxiety. The throat closes. That might be grief. The jaw clenches. That might be anger. The body has been carrying the load for years. The mind just needs to start reading the signals again. It's not about feeling more. It's about noticing what's already there. One thing. This week. One moment where a physical sensation arrives. Tension, heat, tightness, heaviness. And instead of passing over it, name it. Out loud, if possible. Not the right name, any name. The accuracy isn't the point. The connection is. A man who says, "I think that's sadness," for the first time in 15 years, hasn't solved anything. But he's opened a door that's been painted shut since middle school. And the paint wasn't his. Next, this thread continues. The connection between not feeling and not choosing gets clearer. 3 days.